Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation to be here. We're all good? Yeah, looks okay. Yeah, so I'm going to, the EBI is, I think, pretty well established as a major global player in helping people share data and understand what it means. And the world is changing a bit now. That was a brilliant intro from Kim, thank you very much. And we're just going to share some of our experience of what we think some of the problems are and how we're going about trying to set things up so that we all get the access we want to the data we reasonably can. So for an audience, a highly informed audience like this, maybe some of the first couple of slides are pretty straightforward and you know this stuff. But the world has been changing in the way we understand genomics and are able to look at it. And as you all know, all the things that are alive are made of the same stuff. And we've realized that you can learn a huge amount by sequencing their genomes. And we've got really pretty good at doing that. And this is one of EBI's official favorite analogies of the cost of sequencing, say, a human genome. In 2003, it cost us approximately the price of that building on the left-hand side, which famously is known to be the most expensive house in the UK. It's in London, southwest London. And as of a few years ago, when someone first came up with the idea of this slide, the price had reduced to the cost of going to watch Arsenal Football Club play all their home matches in a season. So that's 19 soccer matches to do a human genome. But the slide was drawn up a couple of years ago, and this gives us a great way of adding local flavor. And the local football team, IFK Gothenburg, is kind of known outside the country, I guess. I don't know what the cost of going to see them for a whole season is. I would imagine it's less than the cost of going to watch Arsenal for a whole season. So maybe that's about the right analogy for the cost of a genome now. But certainly it's a price that's dropping and continuing to drop. And one of the things this has done is it's meant that the laboratories where we do a lot of our science have stopped being just the one on the left, the wet lab, and now look more like the one on the right, which is rooms full of computers and hard disk drives. And we now have this huge amount of data being generated, and if anything, we're probably struggling to keep up with the analysis of that. But it's done in a very different way, and we need to learn the different structures to efficiently do that around the world. So EMBL-EBI, the European Molecular Biology Laboratories European Bioinformatics Institute, was established almost 25 years ago now to be a home for Europe, but essentially now with the way the internet works, for the world of molecular biology data that people are prepared to make open and share, and which can have value added to it by being cross-referenced and annotated and integrated and so on. So over those years, we've become a kind of globally trusted provider of this data. We're a pretty serious data center, maybe not by the standards of Amazon or Google, but by the standards of most other scientific research. It's kind of us and CERN are up there as the big players. We're currently working with 200 petabytes of storage across our data centers, 40,000 computing cores, trying to make sense of that data and serve it back to the community. We do that as part of an intergovernmental research organization. So we're a non-profit paid for by, I think, currently 27 largely European, not totally European countries that choose to contribute funding towards this work. We have 650 staff. We're wonderfully international. It's the best place I've ever worked. I worked in University of Cambridge for a number of years. University of Cambridge thinks it's international. It's nothing compared to EMBL. And just a little background for anyone who's interested in EMBL. We have 6 sites. The EBI center top on the slide is one of those 6. We have a headquarters lab, wet labs in Heidelberg in Germany, structural biology labs in Grenoble in France and Hamburg in Germany. neuroscience research outside Rome, and recently, just a couple of years ago, Tissue Biology Disease Modeling Center has been established in Barcelona. It's stepping slightly away from my official EBI hat, because I'm not meant to say this with an EBI hat on. Brexit is a national disaster for the UK, but you didn't hear me say that with an EBI hat on. That's my personal hat. With an EBI hat on, we're massively in favour of the sharing of data and cooperation across any boundary you can think of. And in fact, in the UK terms, we're very lucky in our international status means we're probably the one scientific institution in the UK which is essentially unaffected by Brexit if that goes ahead, which is good luck for us. In fact, there are arguments that will benefit from it, but that does not make us in favour of it. So medical genomics, the world is changing a bit, and now the things that research scientists were doing and think about in relatively small numbers of studies have become being taken up by practicing clinicians who need the same kind of information and knowledge, but work in a very different way. And at EBI, we wondered for a long time why it was we didn't seem to have got involved in the world of practicing medicine, and we kind of took us a few years and we worked out what was going on. And it's this two worlds kind of distinction. So on the left-hand side, there's, the research world of doing genomics is pretty well established and has been for a while. So it primarily works with English as its language, for which I'm very grateful. The legal structures are pretty lightweight. We've got used to sharing data. We don't have a lot of problems with doing that. The different systems for how research is done in different countries are basically pretty similar. We do the work, we share the data, we make our own data open, we apply for grant funding to enable us to do the projects we think are most important, and our aim, apart from simply furthering knowledge, but kind of more personal level sometimes, is we get stuff published to tell others what we have found. In the medical world, things are quite different. So it tends to work, or it virtually always works in whatever the official national language is. Now in the UK and the US it blurs the distinction a little bit because the language research is done in is the same language that practicing clinicians are using to speak to patients, but the rest of the world that tends not to be the case. So there's a distinct divide straight away in how people are working. Medical practices have very heavy legal frameworks they have to operate within in order to protect patients, which of course is the right thing to do. One country to the next operates its medical systems very differently. The data tends to be closed. The results tend not to be published. I mean, of course, there are interesting clinical case studies, but the result of you going to see your GP on a Thursday morning is not get published. And funding tends to be contract-based rather than grant-based. It's arguably that's kind of the same, but using a different terminology. So these groups work very differently. This is an illustration of just within healthcare systems how different things can be, and I won't go into the details, but suffice to say that between the UK and Germany, almost every aspect of the way healthcare is organised is different, and that's not just the UK and Germany is different, that's just one example. And this is the slide Kim seems to have known was coming. In 2012, approximately 1% of the genome and exome data that was being generated, 1% was being funded by healthcare systems, 99% from the research world. Currently, it's more like 20% from healthcare systems, and our projections are that in 5 or 6 years' time, 80% of the genomics data will be coming from healthcare systems, and thus it will be generated by these very different systems that operate in a different way to the research world. These are just some of the efforts going on around Europe and the US to collect large amounts of data. Countries have started realizing that they individually need to do this in an organized manner. So Genomics England planned 100,000 genomes by the end of last year, and that was achieved. And they're moving on to do more and more genomes from routine healthcare rather than selected cases. France, 200,000 genomes coming. Iceland doing 40% of the population. Finland doing a high proportion of their population. US is slightly more complex scenario. I think we'll probably hear more about that later on, so I won't pontificate. And these are EBI's projections, because we worry about this because we're asked to store this data for people. So we're consistently worrying about how much of the stuff there's going to be. So we're looking at the bottom curve in red is projection of rare diseases. So I think there's, for each rare disease case, in the end, there's on average something like 2.5 genome sequence. So that will be a child and one or two parents getting sequenced. And that numbers there look like the graph goes out to 2030, and we're somewhere between 50 and 100 million human genomes being sequenced. The blue line is, the noise on this one we think is much greater, but it's having a go at estimating how many cancer genomes, well, how many individuals with cancer will be genome sequenced, and that goes up to 250 million. So in total, maybe 300 or 350 million human genomes worth of data to be stored in the next, I mean, that's only 11 years away. So it's huge amounts of data being generated in a bunch of different systems, all of which the researchers would like to get their hands on, because humans are a really good study organism. This big, you can get a lot of cells out of them. They walk into phenotyping centers, or doctors' surgeries and hospitals, as they are known. They attract a lot of funding. Great model organism. This is Ewan Birney's line is that they're the best model organism there is out there because of the availability of data, but we can't just take all the data, all 350 million genomes, and share it around. There's a lot of issues around doing that, of course. And we had bridges in the title of the session, so I thought, okay, you can have a bridge. Here's a bridge, and the bridge we need is the one that takes the clinical practitioners on one side and the researchers on the other side, and controls the flow and enables and controls the flow of information they need from each other. The researchers really want this vast amount of data. The clinicians need to know what's been understood about rare disease or genetic disease and so on, and use that information. And so EBI wants to help be part of that system. We can see how difficult it is to join these two different worlds, but our remit is to be a global store of the reference knowledge about humans in general, not individuals, but about humans in general, and about diseases and genetics, genomics knowledge. It's not our role, we don't think it will ever be our role, to store national level collections of genomes. That's best done in the countries themselves within their medical systems. It's not our role to be involved directly in the practice of medicine. That's best done by clinicians, but we're there to help all the components of this system work with each other as best they can. And so lastly, although it's not my own particular baby, I will say a little something about Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. I mean, EBI
keep it very quick.
is a strong supporter of this alliance. We've heard some about it and we'll hear more. The basic idea is to help establish the common framework to enable effective and responsible sharing of data. It's needed because we need the huge amounts of data and we need it to be shared. We heard about Matchmaker, there's many other projects. We need someone to coordinate the ethical issues across sharing data, across different legislated national systems, and we need people to help organize the technology so that we all work in a compatible way with one another. The way to do it will be a federation system, and the basic model moves away from the one on the left where all the data is stored centrally at somewhere like EBI, and moves to one where the data is held separately and the analysis reaches out to data around the whole world to do that. And one of GA4GH's major projects, or set of projects, is to establish the systems to enable researchers in one place in the world to reach out to the data all over everywhere. I think at that point I can leave it there, since I realise I've slightly overstayed my welcome. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to the debate later on.
Thank you very much.